You sold my mother's necklace for spa money? Margaret didn't flinch, just set down the deed to their house. Emma blinked. Lucas paled. She wasn't here to argue. She was here to repossess her legacy. Every account was frozen. Every lie already documented. By the time they begged, their names were already erased from her will. They ignored my calls, dismissed my messages, but they forgot the most dangerous person in the room is the one they think is invisible. Margaret tapped the screen again. Nothing. The message thread with Emma was blank. The little photo icon at the top, once a smiling selfie of Emma and Lucas at the beach, had vanished, replaced with a gray silhouette. No last scene, no typing bubbles, just silence. She opened Instagram next, double-tapping the familiar brunch spot. The newest post came from Emma's profile, a filtered photo of Eggs Benedict, flutes of mimosa, and a caption that read, "Nothing better than Sunday with family." Margaret's hands froze mid-scroll. There they were. Lucas laughing mid-bite, Emma grinning with perfect lighting, and even Emma's cousin Rachel holding a baby bump like a prize. Everyone was there. Everyone except her. She stared at the screen, the quiet in her kitchen suddenly too loud. The ticking clock mocked her. When was the last time they invited her? A month ago, she'd offered to help with nursery shopping. Emma replied with a single, "We've got it covered, thanks." After that, the replies got shorter, fewer emojis, more polite dismissals. Now she wasn't even in the loop. She clicked on Lucas's contact. The message from 2 days ago still showed as delivered but not read. She typed, "Just wondering if you got the blanket I left at the door. It's from my mother's hope chest, handmade, took weeks." No reply. She stared at the send arrow, then sighed and hit send anyway. By afternoon, she baked a small lemon loaf, Lucas's favorite, and wrapped it in parchment with a bow. She placed it gently in a wicker basket with a note. "Thought you might need something sweet this week. Love, Mom." She drove it to their house and placed it quietly on their porch, adjusting the bow once more, like it might make a difference. No one opened the door. No thank you came. Later that evening, her phone buzzed with a new message. Her heart lifted until she saw the name. "Emma. Please stop dropping things by. It makes things uncomfortable for everyone. No thanks, no we're busy, no we appreciate you. Just a boundary, a cold digital wall." Margaret stared at the message for a long time. Then she opened the hallway closet, pulled out a leather folder, and walked to her desk. She sat straight back, silent. She opened her laptop and clicked into an old bookmarked tab, Robinson and Vale Legal, client portal. Her lawyer's face popped up via secure chat. "Margaret," he said, smiling, "didn't expect to hear from you so soon." "I need to amend my will," she said simply. His expression shifted. "You sure?" "Yes," she replied, privately, no alerts, no notifications. "Just quietly remove some names." There was a pause, then he nodded. "I'll send you the secure form. Do you want to add anyone in their place?" "Not yet," she said. "Let's see who earns it." She ended the call, then walked back to the kitchen where her lemon loaf sat untouched. She unwrapped a slice, took one bite, and winced. It had overbaked slightly, still she chewed and smiled. It wasn't the worst thing she'd swallowed that day. As she rinsed the plate, a new notification appeared. Emma had posted a story, her baby shower invite. "Can't wait to celebrate, family only." Margaret hadn't received one. "They said I was overstepping while living under my roof." Margaret stood on the porch, the afternoon sun burning gently across the flower beds she once helped plant, the same hydrangeas Emma now routinely forgot to water. She held a small casserole dish in her hands, chicken and herb, Lucas's comfort food during stressful weeks. She knocked twice, then waited. Through the frosted glass, she saw movement. Emma appeared, phone in hand, expression tight as if she'd just smelled something sour. "Hi, Margaret," Emma said, not opening the door fully. "Oh, this is sweet of you. But maybe next time, just give us a heads up before dropping by." Margaret blinked. "It's Tuesday." Emma gave a light laugh. "Right, but we're trying to set better boundaries now that we're prepping for the baby. Just text first, okay?" She took the dish, smiled like a hostess in a showroom, and gently shut the door before Margaret could step forward. The lock clicked. Margaret stood there for a long moment, the sun pressing down on her cardigan like a silent weight. She turned back to her car and left. That night, she pulled out a manila folder from the back of her filing cabinet. She hadn't looked at it in years, not since Lucas and Emma were house hunting, wide-eyed and newly married, overwhelmed by interest rates and fixer-upper anxiety. She'd offered the down payment, $100,000, wired directly from her late husband's life insurance. She flipped through the documents until she found it, a single-page co-ownership clause added by her attorney at the last minute. Margaret L. Green retains 30% interest in the property located at 921 Forest Knoll Drive until such time as the down payment is repaid in full. She stared at the line like it had been waiting for this moment. She had never been repaid. The next afternoon she called Lucas. "Hey, Mom," he answered, voice casual but clipped. "What's up?" "I stopped by yesterday," she said. "Emma said I should text before visiting." A pause. "Yeah, we're just trying to keep the house calm with the pregnancy and all. I also wanted to ask something. That house deed, is my name still on it?" Another pause, longer this time. "I think so," he said finally. "But it's just like technical, you know?" "No," Margaret replied. "I don't know. Explain it." Lucas sighed. "It's not like you own the place. You helped us start, but it's our home." "Our home," she repeated. "Interesting." That night she met with her lawyer, Harold Vale, at his downtown office. Dimly lit, oak furniture, the scent of old paper and coffee lingering in the air. He adjusted his glasses and examined the folder. "This clause is still valid," he said, tapping the paper. "They never bought you out. No payment records, no amendment. Technically, you're still a co-owner and not a silent one." Margaret exhaled slowly. "So if I wanted to say prevent a remodel or refinance?" "You'd be within your rights," Harold confirmed, "and they'd have to legally notify you before doing anything major with the property." She leaned back in the leather chair, eyes narrowing. "They think I'm overstepping, but I haven't even started walking." As she left the office, the city air was sharp with late fall chill. The traffic buzzed low in the distance, and across the street a boutique window displayed a cozy sign, "Home is where the heart signs the deed." She almost laughed. Almost. Back at home, she pulled up Zillow out of curiosity and found a recent saved listing under Emma's name. Forest Knoll Flip Project. Mid-year Reno budget $150,000. They weren't just living in her house. They were planning to profit off it without telling her. They erased me like a name from a guest list. The invitation never came. Not by email, not by text, not even a cheap Evite with bouncing baby bottles and pastel confetti. Margaret found out about the baby shower from Cheryl, a longtime family friend who called on a Sunday afternoon with innocent excitement. "Just wanted to ask if you're wearing blue or pink for the shower?" Cheryl asked. Margaret blinked. "What shower?" A beat of silence. "Oh," Cheryl hesitated. "Emma's. It's next Saturday at the garden house downtown. I just assumed you were part of the planning committee." Margaret forced a small laugh. "Guess my invitation got lost in the mail." Cheryl stumbled through an apology, her voice tight with confusion and quiet embarrassment. "Maybe check your spam folder?" Margaret thanked her and ended the call. She didn't need to check her spam. She already knew. 3 days later, the photos began rolling in, tag after tag. Pastel decorations, custom cookies, a floral arch spelling Baby G, all her relatives smiling under a golden banner. "Welcome to motherhood, Emma." She wasn't in a single photo, not even the back of her head. But then one appeared. A wide group shot, someone's phone camera capturing the entire crowd, and there she was, just barely visible in the background of a framed family portrait on the wall behind them, a legacy reduced to decor. Then Cheryl tagged her, "Missed seeing this lovely lady today." The tag was gone within the hour. Margaret saw the notification, then the "This content is no longer available" message. That evening, her phone buzzed with a message from Lucas. "Don't make things harder than they are, Mom." 7 words. No, sorry, no, let me explain. Just a boundary disguised as a warning. She didn't reply. Not this time. She sat in her living room, staring at a baby blanket she'd begun knitting weeks ago. Soft yellow yarn, delicate feathered edges. It was folded on the armrest now, untouched. Beside it sat an empty teacup, the last of her chamomile steeped and cold. Margaret picked up the blanket and placed it gently back into the drawer. She didn't cry, but her jaw clenched once, tight and unforgiving. They wanted her gone from the story, written out like an outdated chapter, a footnote. So she closed the emotional book and opened the financial one. The next morning, she visited her bank. The glass door slid open with a mechanical hiss, cool air rushing over her shoulders. The scent of citrusy cleaner and printer ink filled the lobby. She walked straight to the manager's office. "I need to create a private account," she said simply. "New routing, new access, nothing shared." The banker blinked, nodded, and got to work. She transferred the bulk of her savings quietly, All deposits and legal designations tied to Lucas's name were dissolved. By noon. "What would you like to label this account, Mrs. Green?" the banker asked. Margaret paused, then smiled faintly. "Call it contingency." That night, she changed the lockbox password on her legal documents. Then, one by one, she removed framed family photos from her hallway walls. Not with drama, not with tears, just calm precision, like replacing a picture before repainting the room. Not deleting memories, just rearranging what stayed visible. The next morning, she received an email confirmation. Her new account was active. Then, moments later, a notification. Lucas had attempted to access her joint emergency fund. Access denied. She closed her laptop, exhaled, and muttered, "Now we begin." The only time they used my name was to complain. The voicemail wasn't meant for her. Margaret had just finished watering her orchids when the phone buzzed. One new voicemail from Lucas. Her stomach knotted. He rarely called these days, and never without warning. She tapped play, expecting a clumsy apology or a quick check-in. Instead, she heard laughter. Emma's voice came through first, casual, unfiltered, and sharp. "Honestly, if I have to hear one more time about how she helped us buy this house, I'm going to scream." A rustle, maybe a sip of something. "She acts like she's some kind of matriarch," Emma continued, voice curling with disdain. "Newsflash, being old doesn't mean you get to control other people's lives." Another voice joined, Lucas's, hesitant, amused. "Yeah, I mean, I love her, but she's intense," Emma snorted. "She's overbearing. And God, I can't say this without sounding awful, but she's just irrelevant. She doesn't understand how the world works anymore. Old people shouldn't be controlling that much wealth anyway." Laughter. Ice clinking in a glass. Then silence. The message ended with a mechanical beep. Margaret stood perfectly still, the air around her vibrating with invisible electricity. She played it again, then once more, this time recording it on her own phone. Not rage, not tears, just preservation. By late afternoon, she sat across from Harold Vale again, her lawyer and now increasingly her co-strategist. She placed her phone on the table and hit play. Harold didn't interrupt. His expression didn't change, but his eyebrows crept higher as Emma's voice danced through the recording. When it ended, he looked up. "You kept the voicemail." "I did." "Smart." She nodded once. "I want to create a trust," Margaret said, voice like cooled steel. "Private, controlled, no room for interference." Harold opened a new folder. "Revocable or irrevocable?" "Irrevocable, and I want them removed from everything." He blinked. "Everything?" Margaret folded her hands in her lap. "Beneficiaries, financial access, healthcare proxy, any position of presumed trust. Strip it." She reached into her purse and placed a neatly clipped stack of papers on the table. "Here are the assets I want moved, property, stock, bonds. I've already liquidated the joint account." Harold nodded slowly. "You're not just preparing a trust, you're building a firewall." "I'm done waiting for gratitude," she said. "Now I'm writing terms." The office smelled like cedar polish and ink. Outside, the wind swept dry leaves across the sidewalk, scratching faintly at the glass. Margaret sat quietly while Harold typed. Her eyes wandered to a framed quote on the wall. "The best revenge is doing what they said you couldn't." She didn't need revenge. She needed relief. Back home, she printed updated versions of her estate plans and locked them in her safe. Then she poured herself a glass of wine, dry red, sharp on the tongue. She sat by the fireplace and stared at the flames. She wasn't overbearing, she was awake. She wasn't irrelevant, she was underestimated. And that was about to change. The next morning, she opened her legal dashboard. Under trust beneficiaries, 2 names had been officially removed: Lucas Green, Emma Green. They'd never hear about it until it was too late. I showed up with a pie. They served me silence. The pie sat warm in her lap as Margaret pulled into the driveway, a glass dish of brown sugar apple crumble, her signature. The scent filled the car with cinnamon, nutmeg, and effort. She'd used Granny Smith's, Lucas's favorite. A fall family dinner, they'd said, just relaxed and casual. But as she stepped through the front door with a polite smile and pie in hand, the temperature in the room was anything but warm. No one moved to greet her. Emma stood in the dining room arranging eucalyptus sprigs around place cards like a magazine shoot. Her tone was bright, too bright. "Oh, Margaret, you made it," she said without looking up. Lucas gave a quick wave from across the room but didn't get up. His shirt was rumpled, face pinched. Margaret held out the pie. I thought this might go well with coffee later. Emma blinked at it like it was a ticking bomb. Oh, how thoughtful. We already have 2 desserts, but I'm sure someone will try a bite. She placed it beside a store-bought tiramisu without ceremony. Margaret stood there for a moment, unsure whether to remove her coat or her dignity first. Dinner was loud with everything except acknowledgement. Conversations bounced across the table like skipping stones, baby names, a cousin's real estate license, the rising price of organic eggs. Margaret sat near the end, quietly buttering her roll, her presence treated like background noise. She smiled when prompted. She laughed softly when everyone else did, but beneath the table, her hand clenched the napkin tight enough to wrinkle the seams. Halfway through the meal, she caught her name. Well, you know Margaret, Emma said, her voice light but pointed. She means well, but she gets confused. At the baby shower, she thought my OB was a therapist. Laughter rippled down the table. Margaret didn't correct it. She tilted her wine glass and pretended to enjoy the vintage, though it tasted cheap and sour. After dessert, as the guests mingled, she stepped into the hallway for air. The door to the guest bathroom was cracked, and voices floated through. She's obsessed with control, Emma's voice whispered, always showing up unannounced, acting like we owe her something. A second voice, Margaret's niece. I didn't know she helped pay for your house. She offered, Emma snapped. And now she thinks that means she can hang it over us forever. It's unhealthy. Margaret's heart didn't pound. It pulsed, steady and slow, like a match being struck. Not a fire yet, but ready. She didn't interrupt. She just turned and walked to the door. Outside, the autumn air felt cleaner, like it hadn't been shared with false smiles and sharpened words. As she stepped toward her car, she noticed a woman struggling with a stack of moving boxes 2 houses down. Mid-30s, tailored slacks, sensible boots, hair pulled into a low knot. She dropped a file folder, pages scattering like leaves. Margaret bent to help. Thanks, the woman said. First night in a new house and already making a mess. Margaret smiled. New beginnings tend to be messy. They introduced themselves. Her name was Rachel Weller, newly divorced, quiet but warm. An estate attorney just transferred from Chicago. Margaret's smile widened slightly. Estate law? She asked, masking interest with politeness. Messy business, Rachel said, especially when families are involved. Margaret's fingers lingered a beat too long on the edge of a dropped document. She had just found her missing piece. Later that night, Margaret sat in her kitchen, the untouched pie back in her fridge, her coat still smelling faintly of wood smoke and someone else's perfume. She picked up her phone, opened her contacts, and added a new name, Rachel Weller, estate attorney. Then she sent a message. Hi, Rachel, it's Margaret. Wondering if I could show you a few documents sometime soon. There's something off in the numbers. Would love your take, Rachel replied within minutes. Happy to help. Bring everything. Paper trails are my specialty. They blocked my number. I blocked their cash. Margaret's phone buzzed once, a notification from her banking app. Transaction declined. She blinked, then smiled because she was the one who set the limit. The account Lucas had once freely dipped into for emergencies was now a view-only ghost, stripped of its muscle. She had shifted the funds into private holdings and left behind only a husk, a shell of generosity she no longer owed. She opened her notebook, flipped to a fresh page, and began writing. Wedding gift, $25,000. Baby fund, $12,500. Crib, stroller, Emma's nesting retreat. Car deposit, $9,000. Lucas's Honda upgrade. Forest null down payment, $100,000. She paused, tapped her pen once, and added, emotional cost still compounding. On social media, Emma was thriving in her own echo chamber. Margaret hadn't looked until now. She typed in Emma's handle, pausing before switching to her anonymous viewing account, one Rachel had shown her how to create. The profile came up instantly, curated, sparkling, flawless. A new post had just gone live. A photo of a pregnant Emma holding her bump with one hand and a wine glass full of sparkling juice with the other, captioned, "Some parents give life, some just give guilt. Boundaries matter." Generational healing. Margaret's eyes narrowed. The post had over 500 likes and 24 clapping emojis. But it was the story that hit harder. A meme, white text on a soft pink background. If they complain about how much they've given you, they didn't give. It was a loan with interest. Beneath it, Emma had written, "Hard truths from entitled parents. Snip, snip." Margaret sat still for a moment, then got up. She walked to the hall closet and pulled down her fireproof box. Inside, perfectly preserved in manila folders, was every receipt, invoice, wire transfer confirmation, and check stub she'd ever sent in their name. She opened her estate file and began updating it line by line. New assets, removed beneficiaries, date-stamped transactions. Then, at the very back of the folder, she slid in the newest page from her notebook, the handwritten, itemized ledger. Rachel had said it best. If you're going to strike, strike clean. Paper beats personality every time. By sunset, Margaret sat at her desk drafting a formal legal notice. She used Rachel's template. The header was bold, centered, and surgical. Notice of potential asset reclamation from Margaret L. Green to Lucas and Emma Green, re-contributions of tangible value subject to review and reclaim. Below that, she listed every major financial contribution, each with a date, each with documentation ready to attach. At the bottom, she added, to be reviewed for reimbursement under estate protection guidelines. Notice served pending further financial activity. No threats, no rage, just structure. She saved the letter as a draft and printed a hard copy for her safe. As she slid the paper into its envelope, she could hear laughter drifting from her neighbor's backyard, a family BBQ. Clinking glasses, kids chasing bubbles. Margaret watched for a moment through her window, then closed the blinds. Her house was quiet but not empty. It was calculating. On her phone, a new email popped up from Rachel. Subject: found something strange in Emma's records. Call me when you're alone. I bought her a family heirloom. She sold it for spa money. The necklace wasn't just jewelry. It was Margaret's mother's. Art Deco, 1930s. A delicate row of 3 interlinked diamonds set in platinum, each stone cold and glittering like captured moonlight. Her mother had worn it on her wedding day. Margaret had worn it on hers. And on Emma's bridal shower, she'd placed it in a velvet box and slid it across the table with hands that trembled more than she'd expected. I want you to have this, she'd said then, forcing a smile. To wear when you need to feel like a woman who knows her worth. Emma's eyes had widened. It's beautiful, but what, she'd said next, hadn't faded. Is it real? Now 2 years later, Margaret scrolled silently through her screen, blinking at the soft white background of a luxury resale website. Platinum Deco diamond necklace circa 1930s. Certificate of authenticity included. It was unmistakable. The clasp had been custom engraved with a barely visible MLG, something only a trained jeweler or an observant eye would ever spot. She zoomed in. The initials were still there, listed for $6,800. Her fingers froze, then moved. Click, click, confirm. She wasn't buying it back for herself. She was retrieving a stolen legacy. The next day, she called the listed jeweler for authentication. A young man with a cheerful voice answered. Yes, ma'am. This piece came in just last month. The seller said it was an inheritance, needed spa recovery funds. Margaret closed her eyes. She didn't want to be contacted again, the jeweler added. Said it had too much baggage. Margaret's throat tightened, not with sadness, but something colder, finer, like the platinum chain itself. She requested delivery under her anonymous LLC. The necklace arrived 2 days later, packaged in cream satin and silent apology. Margaret didn't cry when she opened the box. She didn't need to. Instead, she took the piece out, examined it under the light, and held it against her own collarbone for a long, quiet minute. It still felt like hers. It always had been. Later that night, she repackaged it, but not to return it. She slipped it into a safe, then in a separate small gift box, identical to the one she'd used on Emma's bridal shower, she placed a folded card. No jewelry, just a note. Careful what you lose. She left it unsigned. The next morning, a private courier delivered it to the Forest Knoll house while Emma was home alone. Security footage later sent to Margaret via her neighbor's ring cam showed Emma opening the box on the porch, brow furrowed. She looked inside, found only the note, read it, stared, then slowly turned in a circle, scanning the street, confused, defensive, alone. The box dangled in her hand, suddenly heavier than any diamond. That night, Lucas called. Margaret let it ring, then listened to the voicemail. Mom, Emma got some kind of weird package today. Did you... Never mind. Look, can we just talk? She didn't return the call. She placed the necklace back in the velvet pouch, labeled it with a date, sealed it inside her safe alongside the trust documents. She wasn't reclaiming jewelry, she was reclaiming value. The next morning, Rachel knocked on her door with a manila folder in hand. You're going to want to see this, she said. Emma's been transferring money monthly from the joint family account to a wellness shell company. Margaret didn't blink. Let's start the audit, she said. They spoke loudly. I moved silently. The calls started slow, a voicemail from Lucas, then a missed call from Emma, then another and another. Margaret watched them pile up like unopened junk mail. Her phone screen stayed dim, her hands stayed busy, cross-checking spreadsheets, sorting legal documents, and sipping tea with the kind of calm that only came after certainty. She didn't block them. She just didn't answer. By Friday, the messages turned frantic. Mom, I need to talk to you. Call me, please. Margaret, there's a weird issue with the mortgage. Did you change something? You're making this harder than it has to be. Each one more brittle than the last. And Margaret? She was in a private conference room at Briarstone Wealth Planning, sitting across from a silver-haired advisor named Dana Greer, who understood discretion like it was a second language. You've done most of the heavy lifting, Dana said, flipping through Margaret's folder. Liquidating unused properties, reallocating assets, freezing joint access. I'm not looking to punish them, Margaret said softly. Just to protect what I've built from people who clearly think I don't deserve to own it anymore. Dana smiled. Then let's make sure this outlives you. On your terms. The next day, while Emma posted a passive-aggressive quote on Instagram, silence speaks volumes when the money stops talking, Margaret was finalizing the sale of a small mountain cottage she'd inherited decades ago. It wasn't much, 2 bedrooms, a broken deck, pine trees growing through the fence, but the land had appreciated. She sold it off-market to a veteran nonprofit. The check cleared for $264,000. Margaret didn't even blink. She deposited it into a trust labeled Legacy Initiative Education, Healthcare, and Emergency Aid. She would outlive them through strangers they'd never bother to learn about. Emma's panic became public by Tuesday. Margaret knew because Rachel forwarded her screenshots of now-deleted posts, thinly veiled jabs about manipulative elders, money hoarding, and toxic silence passed off as boundaries. Even more revealing, a message from Emma's former best friend Tess appeared under the comments, a simple knife of a sentence. You didn't have a problem with her money when you sold her family necklace for a facial package. Margaret raised an eyebrow. Tess and Emma aren't friends anymore? Definitely not, Rachel said. Emma cut her off over some petty comment a year ago. Why? Margaret closed her folder. I need a new healthcare proxy, she said. 2 days later, Margaret invited Tess to coffee. It wasn't awkward. Tess sat down like she already knew the rules of this game. I want to make a few medical directives, Margaret said, stirring her tea. In case anything ever happens. I need someone responsible, private, and not on Emma's Christmas card list. Tess smirked. I keep secrets better than I keep friends. I'm in... Margaret pulled out a folder with the forms already pre-filled. All it needed was a signature. Tess signed it with a steady hand. That night, Margaret turned her phone to airplane mode. The silence wasn't empty. It was curated. She lit a lavender candle, watched the flame flicker in the reflection of her kitchen window. Her house didn't echo with shouting. It pulsed with quiet control, and every decision she'd made was irreversible now. The next morning, Margaret's lawyer forwarded a flagged account alert. Emma had just tried to open a personal credit line using a family trust income letter that no longer existed. Margaret smiled. You're speaking my language now. They tried to flip my house. I flipped the ownership. The whisper came from the guest bathroom vent. Margaret had learned to listen when the house was too quiet, especially when Emma thought she was alone on a phone call. I'm telling you, the appraiser can come Tuesday. Emma's voice echoed faintly through the ductwork. She barely even lives here anymore. Lucas and I need the remodel if we're going to sell next spring. God knows we can't afford another kid in this shoebox. Silence, then a light laugh. Yeah, technically it's still in her name, but that's just paperwork. She's not going to fight it. Margaret, standing in the hallway with a basket of folded towels, didn't flinch. She didn't knock. She didn't announce herself. She just turned back toward her room and made a call. 2 days later, the doorbell rang at 9:43 a.m. Margaret had already brewed the coffee. She opened the door to find a tall man in a sharp blazer, clipboard in hand, and a laminated badge that read Golden Pines Realty. Hi there, here for the interior walkthrough? He said with a polished smile. Emma Green scheduled the appraisal for... She doesn't live here, Margaret said evenly, and she doesn't have the legal authority to schedule anything on this property. The agent's brow lifted. Oh. Is this not 921 Forest Knoll? It is, she replied, stepping back just far enough for him to glimpse the house's curated interior. But my name is still on the deed. I co-own this house. And nothing gets remodeled, refinanced, or touched unless I say so. He blinked. Do you have proof of ownership? Margaret reached for the manila folder on the table beside the door and handed him a copy of the original title, highlighted in yellow, notarized, and recently recertified. Margaret L. Green, 30% legal ownership. The realtor adjusted his grip on the clipboard. I wasn't made aware of this. I'll need to speak with Mrs. Green. Emma, she's not Mrs. Green, Margaret said. She's Emma. And I suggest you do speak with her. She smiled politely and closed the door. Firm, soft, final. Less than an hour later, the front door slammed open. Emma charged in, heels clicking like accusations against the hardwood. What the hell did you do? Margaret looked up from her crossword puzzle, calm as sunlight. You canceled my appraisal. You embarrassed me in front of my realtor. Emma's voice cracked at the edges. Margaret folded the newspaper and set it aside. I didn't cancel anything. I simply answered the door with facts. Emma's face turned blotchy. You're ruining everything. You don't even want this place. You live in the guest wing like a ghost. You're trying to sell my home, Margaret replied, tone cool. You're planning renovations with my equity. That's not ghostly, Emma. That's theft. Lucas appeared in the hallway, face pale, lips parted like he wanted to step in but didn't. Margaret didn't even look at him. Instead, she stood, walked past Emma, and went straight to her office where a stack of pre-filled documents waited. By the end of the day, Margaret had filed a temporary injunction with the county clerk's office, blocking all attempts to refinance, list, or transfer the property. She made sure the paperwork was sent via courier with receipt confirmation to both Lucas's email and Emma's precious joint P.O. box. At 6:02 p.m., Margaret received a single text from Emma. You've made your point. She didn't reply. The point hadn't even begun. That night, Margaret stood on the back porch sipping her tea when Rachel called. The shell company Emma's been using, it's tied to your name. She filed it under your social security number. Margaret set her cup down carefully and whispered, then we stopped playing nice. They never saw it coming because they never looked past themselves. The lawyer's office was silent, save for the soft scratch of a fountain pen gliding across thick paper, the kind of quiet that came right before a storm broke open. And Margaret Green wasn't afraid of storms anymore. She signed her name with a deliberate curve, not trembling, not hesitant. Her hands had steadied long ago, when she stopped begging to be seen and started building in silence. At the top of the document, Last Will and Testament of Margaret L. Green. At the bottom, a new heir, a name not spoken at Forest Knoll in years, Claire Whitaker. Claire wasn't blood, but she was chosen. The daughter of Margaret's late best friend, a registered nurse, single mother of two, raised on the same values Margaret once thought her own children had absorbed: loyalty, humility, grace under fire. Years ago, Margaret had helped pay for Claire's nursing school after a bad car accident derailed her family. No fanfare, no bragging, just a check slipped into an envelope with a note. Keep your head up. The world needs women like you. Claire had never forgotten it. Now the world was going to remember her name. Harold, the estate attorney, tapped the edge of the will gently. You're sure about this, Margaret? As sure as I've ever been about anything. And the no contest clause? Margaret nodded. If Lucas or Emma tries to fight it, cut them out completely. No second chances. No soft landings. Harold slid the document into a leather-bound folder. Then this changes everything. Exactly, she said. Because they thought I never would. That evening, Margaret sat at her writing desk in her sunroom. The golden hour light made everything look gentler than it felt. She picked up a fountain pen, the same one she'd used when Lucas was born to write letters for his baby book, and began, Dear Lucas, you were born into my arms on a quiet September night. You were small, serious, and perfect. I thought I would spend the rest of my life protecting you. But I've come to understand something important. Protection does not mean permission. It does not mean silence. And it does not mean handing over pieces of myself to people who only sharpen them into weapons. You allowed Emma to erase me. You watched it happen, and then you helped her hide the ink. This letter isn't revenge. It's recognition. I see you now, not as a boy needing my care, but as a man making his choices. And I've made mine. I've changed my will. The house, the accounts, the legacy, it's no longer yours to assume. It will go to someone who will respect the roots it was built on. If you choose to fight this, you will lose everything. If you choose to reflect, maybe, just maybe, you'll grow. Goodbye for now. Mom. She let the ink dry slowly, watching each word settle like final dust. Then she folded it, slid it into an envelope, addressed it in her neatest hand. The next morning, she walked it to the mailbox herself. Not the curbside one, the post office. She wanted the tracking receipt in hand, proof it had been delivered, proof it had been read. Then, as the clerk handed her the slip, she reached into her bag and pulled out a second envelope. Her travel confirmation, first class, one way, Athens, Greece. Margaret hadn't been to Europe in decades. But now, with her affairs in order and her legacy freed from hands that had only clutched, she decided it was time to see the ruins that had outlasted empires. She wasn't running. She was ascending. As she walked out of the post office, her phone buzzed. A text from Lucas. One line only. "You changed the will?" Margaret didn't open it. She turned her phone off and walked straight toward the sunlight. "They wanted a house. I gave them a mortgage they couldn't pay." Emma's scream echoed through the marble-floored kitchen, bouncing off the walls like a warning siren. A ceramic mug shattered beside the sink, coffee streaking down white cabinetry in hot, bitter streams. Lucas stood frozen in the hallway, still holding his phone, face pale. "They froze the account," Emma snapped. "Our account." "I can't pay the mortgage, the card declined for the contractor deposit, and the property tax autopay just failed." Lucas rubbed his forehead. "It's the joint trust," he muttered. "It was under her name. She must have shut it down." Emma spun around. "Must have? You said she wouldn't actually do anything." "I said she'd never walk away from us," Lucas replied. "I didn't say she wouldn't protect herself." Emma blinked, stunned. "You mean she's been paying all this time?" Lucas didn't answer, but his silence said everything. They sat at the dining table, once a place of brunches and Instagram charcuterie boards, now littered with overdue notices, flagged emails, and an ominous letter from the bank marked "Urgent account activity frozen pending verification." Emma grabbed her laptop. "I'm not letting her just vanish like this. She doesn't get to disappear and leave us like this." She opened her inbox. Dozens of unread emails from Margaret, all from months ago. Kind messages, financial updates, gentle check-ins, all ignored. Emma dialed her straight to voicemail. "Margaret, if this is your idea of some kind of power trip, congrats. You've left your son in financial freefall. You're punishing your future grandchild. And for what? Pride? You're being selfish." She ended the call without waiting for the beep, then threw her phone against the couch. Lucas was quiet for a long time. Finally, he said, "What if this isn't about revenge? What if it's about freedom?" Emma shot him a glare. "Don't start with the guilt trip. She cut us off. She erased us." "She cleaned up after us for years," he said, voice low. "You sold her mother's necklace." Emma flinched. "Don't act like I'm the only one who made choices," she snapped. "You let her play puppet master because it kept your life easy?" Lucas looked away. Emma stood, and this time when she yelled, it cracked. "She was supposed to give us that house, not trap us with it." The doorbell rang. Emma marched over and flung it open, ready to unleash. But it wasn't Margaret. It was a courier in a blue windbreaker holding a flat envelope. "Delivery for Emma Green. Signature required." She signed without thinking, then tore the envelope open the moment the courier turned away. Inside, crisp, formal parchment, legal insignia, a single bold header. "Notice of estate-based collateral dispute. Contested loan, Forest Knoll property, trust transfer, partial ownership claim active." Her vision tunneled. At the bottom, in sharp professional script, filed by Green Legal Advisory Group, Counsel R. Weller, estate attorney. Filed on behalf of Margaret L. Green. She dropped onto the bench by the front door, the paper trembling in her hands. Lucas approached slowly. "What is it?" Emma stared blankly. "She's contesting the house." He swallowed. "Can she do that?" "She already did." Across town, Margaret sat on a quiet balcony overlooking the Mediterranean Sea, sunlight washing over her like earned grace. Her phone remained off. The ocean breeze whispered peace, but the paper trail she'd left behind was just beginning to shout back. At Forest Knoll, Emma's phone buzzed with a new notification. "Your listed co-owner has placed a hold on property refinancing. All applications suspended." Emma screamed, and this time no one responded. Their fake brunches stopped when the bills arrived. The brunch table looked perfect at Forest Knoll. Emma had arranged everything for Instagram. fresh tulips in a glass vase, mismatched vintage plates, and a tower of lemon scones stacked like edible currency. She'd even chilled sparkling water in clear-cut crystal, pretending it was Prosecco. But the smiles were tight. The guests were thinner in number than usual, and the power had been shut off that morning. "I don't know what happened," Emma lied, voice chipper but strained. "Apparently the utility company made a mistake. Everything's already sorted." She'd lit 3 candles in the kitchen to hide the fact that the stove wasn't working. One guest whispered to another, "Didn't they just remodel?" "Thought so, or trying to." Emma smiled wider. Her phone buzzed on the table beside the avocado toast, a past due notice flashing across the screen. She turned the phone over. Lucas had said nothing all morning. Not when the toilet wouldn't flush properly. Not when the thermostat dropped to 65. And not when Emma tried to bluff her way through another round of "everything's totally fine." He was waiting for the knock. It came at 11:47 a.m., hard, sharp, professional. 3 firm raps on the front door that cut through the air like courtroom gavels. Emma opened it to find a man in a dark navy suit, leather folder in hand. "Delivery from Green Legal Advisory Group," he said, "filed by attorney Rachel Weller on behalf of Margaret L. Green." He handed her the folder and turned without another word. She flipped it open, standing barefoot on the porch, scone crumbs on her shirt. Inside, a formal declaration of financial severance and property lien activation. Every signature was dated, every clause was enforced, every page screamed, "You've already lost." She closed the folder and whispered, "She actually did it." The brunch guests didn't ask what the delivery was. They didn't have to. One by one, they left with awkward excuses. "Dog at the groomer, need to catch a Zoom, forgot my son's recital." By 12:15 p.m., the Tulip sat alone in a room that smelled like cold coffee and unspoken truth. That afternoon, Lucas showed up at Margaret's old craftsman cottage, hat in hand, literally. Margaret didn't smile. She didn't even ask him to come in. He stood on her porch like a boy again, clutching the envelope she already knew contained a plea or an apology or both. "Mom," he began, "this is getting out of hand." "No," she said calmly. "It's getting back into mine." Lucas's jaw flexed. "You're cutting us off from everything. Do you really want your grandchild to grow up resenting you?" Margaret's voice didn't rise. "I want them to grow up learning what consequences look like." He shifted, desperate now. "Emma messed up, but we can fix this. Just come back to the table." "I was never at the table," she replied. "I was cooking for it, paying for it, being dismissed at it." She stepped forward. "You're asking me to reconsider?" He nodded quickly. She met his eyes with the sharpness of years unspoken. "You already did." He left without speaking. She watched him go with no hatred, only clarity. That evening, as the last of the sun dropped behind the trees, Rachel forwarded Margaret a link. An anonymous Reddit post had surfaced. "Imagine faking your brunch life while your mother-in-law is sailing around Greece with your former boss. Inheritance games? To plot twist queen?" Margaret tapped the image. It was a photo. She was standing on the deck of a private yacht, wind in her hair, holding a drink. Next to her, Emma's former marketing exec, the one who'd once fired Emma with the line, "You're a brand risk." The caption below read, "She plays chess, the rest play charcuterie." Emma opened her phone and saw the photo trending. Her ex-boss had just followed Margaret on LinkedIn. Emma's hands trembled. "And Margaret?" Margaret toasted the horizon. "She laughed at my retirement. I retired her lifestyle." Emma was halfway through her 4th glass of boxed rosé when the email landed. The subject line was innocuous enough. "Trust activity notification, administrative hold enacted." She blinked once, twice, the wine buzzing in her head, then clicked. Her screen filled with a sterile, unforgiving letter. "Dear Miss Green, pursuant to the updated terms under the morality clause attached to the fiduciary oversight of the Eleanora M. Whitmore Trust, your disbursements have been suspended pending legal review. The Oversight Committee has determined potential violations of ethics, misuse of public-facing statements, and suspected misappropriation of funds." At the bottom was a familiar name. Margaret L. Green, Emergency Co-Trustee, appointed 2020. Emma's world shrank to the size of the glowing screen. She screamed, not the dramatic, staged kind for social media. This one was raw, ugly, primal, the kind that didn't ask for sympathy, it demanded someone to blame. Lucas rushed into the room, his face lined with exhaustion and fear. "What happened now?" Emma threw the laptop across the couch. She had access to my trust, the one my father left me? Lucas paled. You said no one could touch that. I was sure, her voice cracked. But apparently Daddy Dearest made her emergency co-trustee when he was sick, just in case. And now she's pulled the morality clause? The what? Emma was trembling now. It's some self-righteous legal thing. Basically, if you publicly damage the family's image, they can freeze everything. Lucas rubbed his temples. You did post that breakdown video, Emma glared. You're blaming me? That video was emotional release. Therapy. It was tagged #ToxicBoomers and got 10,000 views. Across the globe, Margaret was seated in a private lounge in Santorini, her tablet open, latte warm in her hand. Rachel had sent her the full trust report for review. One click. That's all it took. Emma's father had appointed Margaret years ago during a quiet conversation over brandy, back when Emma was still pretending to be humble. She'll need watching, he'd said. And you see through performance. He wasn't wrong. Margaret never touched the trust, never asked for authority. But now, with receipts, voice memos, fraud reports, and inheritance manipulation filed neatly into color-coded folders, she pulled the lever. The fund was frozen within minutes. Back in Forest Knoll, Emma's Instagram stories went dark for 12 hours. Then came the video. No filters, no captions, just shaky hands, red eyes, and mascara running like war paint. If you think your parents owe you nothing just because they gave birth to you, fine. But some of us earned our place in the world. Some of us had to climb out of someone else's shadow just to breathe. I've been targeted. I've been stripped. And I see you all cheering for it like it's some Netflix drama. Just wait until it's your mother cutting you out. It ended with her sobbing into the crook of her arm. She posted it without watching it back, and within hours, it spread like wildfire. Hashtags trended. #RichGirlMeltdown, #TrustFundTrouble, #Margaret wins. People dissected every second like courtroom analysts. TikTok stitched clips over triumphant music. Reddit threads speculated on what Margaret would do next. Then came the hammer blow. Her workplace, the boutique marketing firm she'd boasted about for years, sent a cold 3-line message. Emma, following recent public disclosures and pending review, your position has been placed on immediate unpaid suspension. Please refrain from representing the company in any public content moving forward. Emma didn't cry this time. She laughed, hysterical, choking laughter that turned into a dry cough. Across the sea, Margaret glanced at her screen one final time, reading the news of Emma's suspension with a sip of her drink. She didn't gloat. She didn't text anyone. She simply whispered to herself, morality clause, consider it enacted. The next morning, Emma received a new message, this time from the bank. Final notice, mortgage payment overdue, intent to foreclose issued. She dropped her phone. And Margaret? She booked a cooking class in Manos. They skipped my milestone. I celebrated without them, with silence and champagne. The candles flickered softly in the courtyard breeze, casting golden halos across the long dinner table set under blooming olive branches. There were no streamers, no party hats, no surprise shouted from behind a curtain. Just candlelight, string lights, laughter, and peace. Margaret sat at the head of the table, wrapped in a soft linen shawl the color of pearl. Her hair was pulled back in a silver twist, and her wineglass glinted with chilled brut. 69 years, and not a single member of her family in sight, and yet, for the first time in decades, she felt entirely seen. Her guests weren't bound by blood, but by something better, presence. Rachel, her attorney-turned-confidant, raised a toast with dry wit and sharp insight. Claire, her newly named heir, brought 2 hand-drawn cards from her children. Tess, Emma's former best friend, baked a layered pistachio cake that didn't try too hard. Even a pair of kind strangers from the hotel staff she'd befriended in Santorini stopped by with fresh honeycomb and local flowers. It was quiet, elegant, intentional. The opposite of the chaos she'd walked away from. As the last bites of cake disappeared, Margaret leaned back and let the night air fill her lungs, jasmine, roasted rosemary, ocean salt clinging to the edge of the breeze. Someone asked gently, "Do you miss them?" She didn't answer right away. She looked out past the stone wall where the sea blinked in the distance, calm and constant. "I miss who they pretended to be," she finally said, "but the silence has been kinder than their voices ever were." She was still sitting on the patio when the courier arrived, a man in a crisp white button-down, holding a small rectangular envelope and a tablet for signature. "Miss Green," Yes. This came priority. Sender listed only as Emma. She accepted it with one hand and signed without hesitation. The envelope was handwritten, no postage, just her name, Margaret, in looping cursive that tried too hard to look effortless. The seal was slightly smudged, like fingers had trembled before pressing it closed. She turned it over in her lap but didn't open it. Back inside, the lights were dimmed low, the wine glasses rinsed and turned upside down on the drying rack. The villa's stone fireplace crackled gently, waiting like a quiet witness. Margaret stood in front of it, envelope in hand. She held it for a long time. Her breath was steady, but her jaw tensed, memory tugging at her like static. She imagined the contents, apologies too late, tears too easy, twisted logic wrapped in nostalgia, a plea, a trick, or worse, one last attempt to rewrite the ending. She stepped closer to the flames. The paper caught instantly, a curl of black, a burst of orange. She watched it crumble, like everything else they'd thought they owned. No one needed to hear her response. Some messages are best left unread. She poured herself a final glass of champagne, sat alone beneath the open sky, and smiled. Not wide, not proud, but whole. For the first time, her birthday was not a performance. It was a boundary, and she had drawn it in fire. The next morning, Claire arrived with fresh croissants and a news alert. Emma's workplace had issued a formal separation, and someone had anonymously leaked the full trust fraud timeline to a national business blog. Margaret took a bite of flaky pastry, wiped the corner of her mouth, and said, "Good, now it's out of my hands. They blocked me from their lives. I blocked them from my legacy." The sea whispered against the shore like a long exhale, pulling back decades of noise. Margaret sat on a cedar balcony overlooking the cove, wrapped in a soft ivory cardigan, a book balanced on her lap but unread. The small coastal town of Windermere Bay had no delivery drones, no glossy brunch spots, and no one asking if she still used Facebook. It had gulls, salt wind, and handwritten menus. It had quiet. And for the first time in years, she had peace. She'd bought the cottage outright, cash deal, no signatures needed from anyone but her. A 2-bedroom sanctuary with wild rosemary growing at the gate and white curtains that moved like breath. The mail here was slow and sincere, her name written in ink, not algorithms. And every week, Claire sent her updates from the mountains, where Margaret's old family cabin, once rotting and forgotten, was being transformed into something new, a wellness retreat for women rebuilding their lives. The photos came printed, not digital. Claire's handwriting was neat but unpretentious. "We've repainted the porch swings. I kept the one with your initials etched into the armrest. The girls love it. They call it the Quiet Queen's Throne." Margaret traced her fingers over the note, smiling. It wasn't legacy in marble or museums. It was legacy in muscle, in healing, in hands that would never sign away their power without knowing what they were worth. One morning, the wind brought a scent of pine and coffee through the window. She was stirring cream into her mug when her phone, now rarely used, buzzed. One new voice message from Lucas. She stared at it for a long time, not surprised, not angry, just still. She pressed play. His voice was lower than she remembered, rougher, a shade of regret in every syllable. "Mom, I don't know if you'll ever listen to this, but I guess I didn't think it would go this far. I thought you'd come back eventually. That maybe you just needed space. I didn't think you meant to shut us out forever. Emma's gone. Really gone this time. We lost the house. I'm starting over. I don't blame you for any of it. I just wanted to say..." Pause. "I'm sorry. For not protecting you when I should have. For staying quiet. For thinking love meant staying comfortable. That's all. You don't have to reply. I just wanted to say it once." The message ended with silence. Margaret didn't cry. She didn't shake. She simply set her coffee down, took one last glance at the sea where 2 sailboats passed each other like strangers in slow motion. Then she pressed delete. No archive, no voicemail inbox. Just erased. Like the years she spent shrinking herself. The fire crackled in the corner hearth as she sat by the window with her knitting bag. She didn't knit much anymore, but she liked to keep the needles close, reminders of how quietly something strong could be built. A scarf. A contract, a legacy. She reached into the side drawer and took out the final draft of her estate plan, signed, witnessed, sealed. Claire received 80% of the estate, the other 20% allocated to the nonprofit foundation now running the cabin. The clause read, to be used for restoration, recovery, and reclamation of women who have been silenced by those who called it love. She smiled, not out of vengeance, but validation. Outside, a local teenager on a bike waved. "Morning, Miss Green," she waved back. Not mom, not mother-in-law, just Miss Green, and that was enough. They blocked my number, but I still had the last word. In ink, signature, and silence.